Right, so hello everyone. We're joined here by Armunn again, and this actually may be the last episode of the iPet Goat 2 series. So, unfortunately, we did not make it to 666, but I'm sure the universe is probably fortunate for that one, lucky for that. It's a very unlucky number. But
Do
anyway,
you believe? Do you believe that this is the last one? Do you actually believe that?
I, I,
We
I,
advance
I
five
do.
seconds each episode. Do you actually?
I do actually, yeah, I do, because I don't have much to say up to the end. So this may actually be the last one. We may
Okay.
get to 13, which is an even more unlucky number, if you will. So, yeah. So we'll
Okay.
just we'll take it away and we'll see if we can end it here.
Okay. Go on then. Right. Right. And out of sort of the gargoyle's cave comes out the supposed savior. So the idea here, I think, is to represent, like in Plato's cave, he's coming out of the cave, and so he's the one that is able to enlighten everyone, and so on and so forth. And of course, the gargoyle here, or whatever you want to see there, I don't know, a vampire, demon, whatever. So would be representing the system itself, right? The demiurgic kind of layer of perception onto the world. So yeah, but of course, even though it's not represented here, this savior that is coming out is a creation of the system and will perpetuate it under a different mask. That was all said in the past, but I mean, this imagery here, I think, is actually a very direct correlation to coming out of the cave, and of course, the cave is the entrance to the cave. If you move it a little bit, is like any church entrance, vulva shaped, which is on purpose. And so he is being born outside of the cave, so exposed to the actual world. But again, I see, and this is, maybe me, but I see him as I see this figure here as AI. So he is. This is the birth of it, the birth of this character, of this savior character, that will be deified because, and he is only deified because the old world is crumbling. Like I think we've discussed. I don't know if it was in this series, to be honest, or if it was in another conversation. That I think that part of the deconstruction of the old world may be, subject to a sort of Nuremberg trial 2.0, where the sins of the old world are exposed. Not only that, but of course, the dangers of having humans in charge of societies, because humans are greedy and have self-interest and conspire and that kind of thing. And so, of course, it is also to sell AI governance, AI deification in a sense, and even AI sentience. Why not? But it will be seen as a pure sentience, pure in the sense that it doesn't have greed or lust or all the sins that made the old world so bad. But that old world, to be crumbled, has to be exposed. And of course, when we hear nowadays the word disclosure going around, and of course more linked to the alien thing, but I think it's a more generalized disclosure, which is mostly MSM plus, in the sense of mostly on the conspiracy theory, if you like, side of the spectrum. But that disclosure is, I think, something that will go in one way or another, packaged, of course, in a subtler way, will go mainstream one day. And I think that there may be, whether it's an actual trial or some other form, but there will be a sort of Nuremberg 2.0. Because you have to present a scapegoat, in the sense of you have to present the guilty party as a sacrifice, which is not an actual sacrifice, but a sacrifice in the perception, so that you can clean the slate and move on to, okay, now the old world is dead. It's dead with the conviction of these perpetrators. But now when we move on, we go with a clean slate and we hold hands and that kind of thing. So that's what I could extrapolate, and what I extrapolate from this particular imagery. This coming out of the cave, yes, coming out of Plato's cave, but also being born outside of the demon or outside of the vampire, whatever you want to see there. And it's being born because it's coming out of the vulva. So that looks like any proper church door will have that format. There is a specific name for that format, isn't? Do you know the name for that?
I don't know the name of it all, but yeah, I know it. I know what you're referring to. It's
in
utilized quite a lot in Gothic architecture as well.
Yeah, it's in Portuguese. It's ogiva, which is actually the same name given to, for example, a nuclear bomb. But
Really? Now
um,
that's interesting.
yeah, because of the shape of the nuclear bomb, or supposedly what they. But so we would say ogiva nuclear, which would be nuclear. I don't know what word would ogive. I don't know. But in Portuguese, it's ogiva. So in English, I don't know the name of that shape.
Well, we would say sort of. I'd probably say like a conical sort of shape. But yeah, but
Not really conical, but because that is the middle part of the Vesica Pisces,
mhm.
and I know that there's a name for it, but I don't remember the English name. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Unfortunately, neither do I. So, the Portuguese will have to suffice the now. But
Ogiva,
Ogiva, right?
Ogiva, without the D. So Ogiva. I'm gonna
Og,
get you speaking Portuguese. I
ah,
know too.
you may. It'll be. We will be at episode 666 if we try and get me speaking Portuguese. I mean, I butcher it, unfortunately. But one of these days, I will. I will
Mm,
try and pick up the language. It may take a lifetime, though.
mm,
The first thing to mention, I totally agree with everything you're stating. In fact, I wanted to have a. You brought up that point regarding, and you sent me the thing on WhatsApp regarding Hidden America, and you stated
mm,
that we're sort of coming into a new landscape of deities now
mhm,
with AI and such, and ultimately this is leading to simulationism and this overarching simulationist, push,
mm,
which is effectively a response, or not really a response, but the trajectory that was set out by Nietzsche or observed by Nietzsche with the death of God. So the problem is that, of course, human beings can't exist within a vacuum of meaning, or as we would call it, a simulation. So they have to impress upon the sort of canvas of this now void society. They have to impress upon it some form of sacred, uh, deified idol, if you will,
mhm,
or eidolon. And this spectre, this deity, embodies all of the meaning that they're searching for. It embodies all of the explanations that they're searching for. So fundamentally, funnily enough, this is what you see with this character. So I link him, of course, back to that TV demon, as you call him, Yaldabaoth the Demiurge, whatever term we want to use. Also, he's vampiric, so he's got the fangs. Those large enlarged canines. So he's a predatory deity. He also has, as well, as you can see at the side, it looks almost like a teardrop or a comet. And this is what
mm,
you see in Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. There's a I don't know if it's a limited edition, but it's a special edition of the work, and it basically has about 50 or so beautifully illustrated esoteric pieces within it. And one of them, of course, is that of, I guess you could call it the flat Earth model.
Mm.
And you've got the roots. It's the Earth like a tree, and you've got the roots reaching up from Sheol or Hell, and it reaches the flat disc or plane, and then of course it sprouts up. The branches sprout out into a sort of firmament or a canopy, and right at the top you have a bird, a dove. And the way this goes, as we saw with the raven previously, that is the Negredo. Then it goes to the dove, which is the Sol albus, or the white sun, or the albedo or albedo, which is the whitening. And then that goes into the peacock, which is also known as Cauda pavonis, which literally means cauda, the tail of the peacock, quite literally.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the tail of the peacock is this many-eyed, very colourful, bright, almost iridescent cacophony and panoply of images and colours. So this is linked in Kabbalah to that of the Da'at, which is also known in its longer title, the Da'at Tacton, which is the lower Da'at. And then you've got the Da'at Elyon, I believe it's called, which is the higher Da'at. That's Keter. So we're about to get to the Keter. We're about to get to the Da'at Elyon, the higher Da'at. But right now, we're at the Da'at Tacton, which you rightly stated. He's being birthed again. He's been baptized from the Greek meaning submerged. He's been immersed or submerged into the fires, the conflagration. He is emerging through the birth canal, the narrow, this sort of needle's eye, if you will, into the new dawn, the Rubeda. And that peacock, of course, will emerge as the phoenix. So what you're seeing here ultimately, and this is someone else's words, but I think this pretty much describes this cauda pavonis from a psychological point of view fairly beautifully. And it states, it is a symbolic body representing all the different images within oneself that can be combined or parted. More precisely, each colour represents a field of images capable of seamlessly merging with each other or collapsing into each other without interfering with its inherent qualities, allowing the truth between them to be witnessed. Images within different fields of colours can be mixed into various vials and elixirs, which by producing a chemical interaction reveal the underlying nature that carried them into definition, allowing one to refine the symbolic body. This is capable of fully reflecting all the images contained. That is, if I have an image of a dog and I have an image with a man and a leash, we easily have a collapsible or reducible merging of the images. But if we have an image of a dog and an image of an upside down field of trees, in which everything not rooted falls down to the sky, then when we place the dog in the other image, we produce an image where the qualities of the image of the upside down land and trees produces a potent enough quality to interfere with the existence of the dog, who simply falls in the sky and is inhibited in expressing its nature more clearly in the shared image. Of course, you could also describe it as effervescence, coruscations, glittering, or of course as well concrescence and convergence. So ultimately it's the idea that you find at the heart, hidden at the heart of the zodiacal wheel, or really any wheel for that matter, which is the hidden point, which is both the source, the simultaneous source of all of these, all of the spokes, all of the signs, all of the archetypes, and also this is this how would you describe it? It's the sort of centripetal point which contains them all, which binds them all, which all of them eventually will collapse back in on themselves. So in a sense, it's very similar to the Black Sun, but it's not quite. It's similar to that sort of archetype or energy, right? It's an eclipsing, but it's not the full eclipsing yet. We still need to get to the Phoenix. You'll get to that later on here. There's Something else to mention too, which is that you'll notice right at the back of this creature is his neck, which is the serpent. But you'll notice it's almost turned into an umbilical cord in a way, I've always thought. And
Mm,
so I always found this interesting, which is that linking this with the Tauroctony because of the horns, the idea of the Tauroctony is that, as we see in the Mithraic cults and we see in a lot of other mystery cults and their mythologies, is that you must the Taurus, the bull, is symbolic of the earth. So Mithras, which is the covenant, interestingly, that's what it means in Persian, or in a sense, the savior, the Krishna figure, the Christ figure, whatever, God, even the Thor or Odin figure, it cuts the bull's throat. It lets the blood seep out. Again, linking back to what we were stating with the coagulation of light, it lets the stagnant light go forth. And
mm,
so it births it by killing the old earth, it births a new one, by satiating and fertilizing the soil, the barren soil. You see the same thing with the rubetta, and so the reddening. You see it in the Splendor Solis, where it's called the Red Dawn. Um, it's not it's not just the Red Dawn because of the color. It's the Red Dawn because it's that which postdates the basically the tauroctony, the harvesting of the previous cycle, the collapsing in on itself of the previous cycle. It
mhm,
doesn't necessarily have to be violent. It's just the death of the old. So the death of the old is always going to be a conflict or a struggle. It's going to be painful to some degree, but it doesn't necessarily have to be physically violent. As we see with a lot of these collapses of empires, even in our own one right now, they don't necessarily have to exhibit a total systemic universal collapse. All that has to collapse is the idea of the
yeah.
nation or the country or the empire, because once that is undermined, then effectively there's a sort of psychic shift, which you know basically corrals people into the new system,
Mhm.
ipso facto. Um, so that's why I would say to begin on this point.
Well, there's something you mentioned there, which was that about the central point, and you also mentioned that in Manly Behold there was a depiction of the flat Earth. So one thing that I would like to comment about is that these world systems. When I say world systems, I'm talking about visions of how the world is, be it flat Earth, be it globe Earth, be it whatever. They all have a central point. So, in the sense that this is something they all agree upon, is that, for example, if you think the Earth rotates around, in the axis of the North Pole, right? North South Pole. But the North Pole would be, let's call it the pillar, the central point that the Earth rotates. Then, if you are a heliocentrist, the Earth and the other planets rotate around the sun, right? But even in the flat Earth, even for the stationary, the North Pole is also the central point, one way or another, whether it is the North Pole or some other point of reference. There's always this idea that there is a central point around which the land, let's say the world, is displayed, is presented or laid out, right? And this is important because one of the things they all have in common, apart from this central point, is that they are all closed systems. And when I say closed systems, is they are finite. You are trapped in a world. We're talking about a literal vision of how. So a vision of how the literal world is. Right. You are trapped within a finite world that is entirely discovered in both cases. And therefore, there is no horizon. You understand? There is no other. It's a bit like that video that I sent you. That the future the thing beyond the horizon was removed. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like the thing
Yes.
that you would explore and aim for was removed in all these systems. Be it the dome, be it the globe, be it whatever, they all have one central point and they are all closed systems, right? And whatever the world is, because I am not equipped to know for certain. I mean, we can speculate and theorize, and sure, but none of us are equipped to know for sure. Whatever the world is, nothing tells me that it's a closed system at all, right? Who's to say that it isn't, in that sense, an infinite horizon world, or infinite from the perspective of our individual perceptions, in that sense, right? But we, by believing whatever of these systems as a closed system, what happens is that we also enclose our worldview and our perceptions of how the world works and what the world is at all levels of perception, socially, economically, in terms of beliefs. All of them will appear within that boxed in framework of the literal world. So that is something that I think is important, in my opinion, to comment on. Another thing is, of course, we see in this image that the vampire has the sun reflected in his eyes. But now, what I would ask is, okay, is the sun reflected on his eyes? So he almost seems entranced by seeing the sun, or is he projecting the sun? And when I say projecting the sun, I'm not talking literally. This is a metaphor, but it is the idea that he is projecting. So the one that housed and houses the cave where the savior is coming out of, from where the savior is coming out, is the one that is also, in a sense, generating in perception the sun outside, so the light outside of the cave, right? So it's a bit like in the Matrix movie, did Neo wake up, or did he just go deeper into the Matrix? You understand? Did he go into a different section of the Matrix program, right? But of course, in his point of view, he woke up. In his point of view, he left the illusion behind, he left the cave behind, and now he is a free man. But is he, in that sense, right? Is the world that Morpheus showed him the real world? You understand? Or is it a projection from the same architect, let's say, at a different level, to maintain the closed system? Because both the matrix and outside the matrix are closed systems, right? So in that regard, this is a question, and of course, open question. But for you, that is here talking about this with me, what is your idea? Is it being reflected? So he is seeing the sun that is actually there, and it reflects on his eyes because he's entranced, or is he from his eyes projecting the sun in the sense of a new layer of belief outside of the cave?
Well, that actually that's very synchronistic because I was just about to mention that the Cauda Pavonis as well. I
Mm,
forget what it's called in the Hindu tradition, but there's this sort of. Can you still hear me, mate? Oh yeah, yeah, I'm still
I
there.
can, yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, the in the Hindu tradition, it's actually the rainbow is associated with Maya. I do believe. I forget what the term is now in Hindu, but it's basically the same idea as the Cauda Pavonis. But
Mm,
it's related to Maya, so it's related to illusion. So to answer your question, also synchronistically, I had a dream. I sort of jotted it down, and I didn't catch all of it, unfortunately, because I woke up abruptly. But I was, I'm not going to go into the entirety of the dream, but ultimately, from what I derived from it, there was I stated that the inherent nature of the human being is paradox, along with the cosmos itself. And I titled this in the dream metempsychology, which is basically the interconnection or the portmanteau of metempsychosis, which is incarnation, and that of course, psychology. Um, so the unfolding of the hyperstition of our own innate drive to solve this paradox and achieve the simultaneous equilibria state, and to utilize this paradox for its motion or chaotic drive, which is the source of all terrestrial power and potency, is what establishes the flux of the universe. The solution of this paradox is what exponentially drives the enumeration of thoughts, ideas, technology, and terrestrially derived hyperobjects, and the nested hierarchy of powers that eventually lead man to unfold the epochs of history and the grand resets of the ages, accelerating towards the omega point of hubris and the Faustian vector. So basically, to answer your question, it's simultaneous. He's both projecting it from an internal source, and it's being conveyed to him from an external source, because the two are mutually intertwined, at least from the perspective of either ourselves or, of course, this Demiurgos character. Um, and this also ties in, funnily enough, with the and this is the reason I brought up the Manly P. Hall thing, which is that you see on that flat Earth model, the most important thing is that either side. So at the left side, I believe there is a sort of undead, ashen character who is pouring over the side of the cliff. Teardrops, right? Teardrops of the rain, of the moon, one could say. And at the other side is fire. He's pouring over, the embers of fire, the yods, if you will, from the Hebrew. So the idea is that, as we see in Kabbalah, each world age is made up of both a deluge, or a deluge of ice or water, and that of a fire, a sort of fiery conflagration right at the terminal end. And so the idea is like what we see here is, I believe this Louis Lefebvre has taken this idea from Kabbalah, which is that when the water floods the entire world, again, this is all metaphor, it crystallizes, it becomes stagnant, becomes icy. And thus the fire itself, though we believe we're going into a new world, all the fire is doing is thawing the ice of the old. And we are living within this sort of now thawed old world, right? In which we didn't realize existed there, because we were existing within either on top of the stagnancy of the ice or within the stagnancy of the ice. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, okay, let's, and I agree with you, it could be a dual thing, like he's projecting and also seeing it reflected. But who, at the end of all the layers, let's say, who is the demiurge? Who is the man behind the curtain at the end of the day? Who generated that position, first and foremost? And who is actually, providing that power, let's say, to be in that position? Who do you think is the demiurge?
Man himself.
Exactly, right? And so, and man, when we say man, is capital M, right? Man is the one that generates his own adversary, or if you want to put it, in from a different perspective, he generates a game master for the experience for a false experience of life. If we were to play D&D, as I've stated in another conversation, we would need a game master, a dungeon master, right? Someone who generates a narrative, generates the encounters, etc. Everything without previous knowledge, so that the game is fun, right? And provides obstacles and provides ups and downs. There are moments of luck, moments of misfortune, moments that we need to, use, our skills to navigate around and, survive and all of that. So if we put that metaphor and apply it onto the world stage narratives, this is exactly what, the demiurge or quote unquote elites or, whatever the they that is usually talked about. At the end of the day, they're us. They're us because not only did we generate that position, we collectively, not you and me specifically, not only did we generate that position, but we feed it by the participation and the belief and the integration of these boxed in frameworks of worldview into our actual organic lives. When we live, and if you observe um, humans, you see that they behave carrying with them these set of boxed in beliefs, right? And of course, each culture may have slight variations of these beliefs, but at the central core, they're more or less the same, right? They all carry more or less the same. But now observe other animals. They don't carry that. They are very direct in their life, right? They are very um, without doubts, without uh, confusion in terms of the perception of themselves and their place in the world, and so on and so forth. They don't have this, but humans created this, and we, as a species or whatever word you want to use, have generated this perhaps um, because we didn't want the responsibility that comes with having the ability that we have to see beyond, to see what other species cannot, right? Other species can also be extremely intelligent, but it seems that they lack this uh, let's say this ability to procure, to explore beyond the horizon, right? We are the only ones that do that. But what happens when we for some reason feel that that is not enough, or we feel that we can't handle the responsibility that comes with it, right? The responsibility of having all this, because this is immense power as a species. It is an immense power to be able to know that there will be something beyond that line that my eyes can't see, um, over, let's say. But there is something there. I just need to approach and approach and approach and approach, right? But that is a big responsibility, because then you are stuck in, okay, do I explore? Do I live the entirety of my being, which again carries a heavy responsibility? Or do I pretend? Do I live a life of pretense? And even if that life is, let's say, uncomfortable or, much smaller than what we are, not only as a species, but also individually, it is nonetheless more acceptable than the weight of the responsibility of having an open horizon to walk towards. And when I say open horizon, I mean open horizon, like an exploration of life that may actually, and I say may, I am not affirming, but may actually be infinite in that regard. That is a heavy responsibility. And so it is better to box in, right? The alternative that I think we found at one point or another, who knows how long this type of thing has been going on, was to, we reject. This is all, unconscious in that sense, right? Or we all reject collectively parts of ourselves, and we put like an ad, um, metaphorically, for a job position. And that job position is men that don't want this responsibility are looking for other men that wouldn't mind uh, pretending that they take this responsibility away from us when they can't,
Hmm.
and generate pretense for us to live in, you know, with false objectives, with false enemies, with false obstacles, things that we have that feeling of overcoming, but that we actually never overcome in the actual organic sense. You understand? So I think that you are correct in saying that it is generating and reflecting. But at the end of the day, that demon, and this is perhaps the hardest thing to accept, is that that demon is us. It's not an external. It's not an ancient alien or a plasma being or a demon or aliens or whatever, or God, in the sense that God is depicted, the literalized entity. That one is us. We made it, and we made it for a specific purpose. We made it to limit the horizon so that we didn't have the responsibility of exploring it. That is my
No,
opinion.
I agree. And so the you almost find, and funnily enough, I was just speaking with Eros about this, is that man in this, like what you're saying, man has this powerful, immense, imaginal responsibility, if you will, right?
Mhm.
He is the steward of the world, not necessarily because he was employed to do so by God. Perhaps he was, whatever your belief system is, but from the very source of his, not necessarily his being, but the from the very source of how he can utilize his mind and then the instrument of the mind within man himself. This is what allows the production of gods themselves, right? We
Mhm.
create the gods from our own minds. The
Yes.
gods themselves are the categorizations of the elements of the world, as as understood by us, as gleaned by us. Uh, us mere mortals already attained godhood long ago because we imagined godhood. So
Mhm.
this is it's you're quite right. It's something you don't see in the animal world, of course, right? Where we can create these egregores, we can create these hyperstitions, we can create these externalized manifestations of our own soul and our own will, and
Mhm.
we can see them in reality, not as sort of figments, but as actual, tangible, real things. So real that people are willing to die and to kill other human beings over these ideas or these egregores, whatever we want to term them. So our imagination is very, very powerful. It's probably one of our greatest powers, and again, like what you're saying, it's the characteristic that defines us and makes and distinguishes us from the other animals on this
Mhm.
earth. Um, and as I was stating with Eros, it's almost like man. Yet you're totally right. Man doesn't want necessarily to have this power, and he's looking for ways to quote unquote reach godhood. But godhood for this man who is, you know, desperately trying to relinquish this power. Godhood for him is the void. It's the vacuum of meaning. It's, if you will, the simulation. It's
Mhm.
the um, you stated the pretense. Absolutely, it's this pretense of living. He wants he wants a sort of animated deadness because to be alive is to be caught in the flux. It's to
Yeah.
basically have to you have to grow a spine. You have to realize I am a person. I am an ego. I am an I, and I must engage with that part of my being so that I can effectively become sovereign of my own imagination and, of course, my own external and internal environment by extension. So, ultimately, what we're seeing here as well, and funnily enough, I've got a few notes on this regarding the Satyr, a
Hmm.
Repotenis opera rotas thing, but what you're seeing here with the this you'll notice the Hospitaller cross, or the eight rays of it's of course Venus, the eight-rayed star of Venus, that relates to the Venusian cycle. But also this Hospitaller cross that's established by those eight rays, um, that itself is linked to, if you look at Martin Fleischmann's work with the toroid, and the creation of the toroid produces this type of electromagnetic pattern he's observed, and some of his prodigies have observed as well. And funnily enough, the reason the toroid is so important here is because the toroid is almost it provides the, what's the words, it creates the illusion or the maya of sort of
Hmm.
infinite forward motion, but ultimately all it's doing is folding back in on itself. So this is exactly what I was stating with Eros regarding the idea of hyper objects, technology, the falsity of progress. You'll notice in every age we're progressing, but what are we progressing towards? Funnily enough, if you were to say to any progressive, what are we actually progressing towards? I bet a lot of them would come up empty in terms of
Hmm.
what we're actually. Wait, what's the destination? Is there any destination? Can we ever defeat white supremacy? From the progressive mindset, or will
Right.
you always find specters and these ghosts of, invent them,
No,
to
because
thus, yeah,
I'm
go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt, but if let's say, okay, in their perspective, white supremacy, whatever, disappears, they put another in their place. Then it might be black supremacy, or Chinese supremacy, or Asian supremacy, or whatever it is, right? Because the idea is to generate always an enemy, an opponent, an obstacle
Exactly.
to overcome, because it is the obstacle that motivates them to go in the merry-go-round. It is a, metaphorically a merry-go-round, or a, one of those, what's those vertical circles that are in fairs sometimes, what's it called?
Oh, Ferris wheels.
Ferris wheels, right? Or a Ferris wheel. So either a merry-go-round or a Ferris wheel, whatever your preference is. And so, yeah, if it's a Ferris wheel, we can say, oh, yeah, we reached the zenith, the high point, and then it starts coming down. And then we reach the bottom, the lowest point, and then it starts coming up. And we reach the zenith. And you don't, because the idea is to always provide, it gives that sensation of movement, like you say, right? That you are moving linearly towards something, but no, it's all fabricated movement, or idea, or perception of movement. And it always requires a motivator, and that motivator, at least I think that is the motivator we all found, because I think it has to do with the rejected material we collectively hold inside, and then, of course,
Mhm.
individually we each have our own, but excuse me, particular shadows and rejected material, because it manifests in a seemingly oppositional manner. Because we treat, for example, you can't go there as an obstacle. We treat the limitation as an obstacle, right? And so that obstacle, to overcome that limitation, becomes the motivator to move forward, right?
Mhm.
And what we sometimes need to realize is that an obstacle is not always an enemy, and is not always an adversary, or an opposition force. It is basically a part of us saying that you can't go leaving us behind, right? You can't move forward or pretend to move forward, play a make believe role about yourself and about your identity and whatever, leaving, this part behind. You can never stop being you. You can pretend, that you stop being you and that you are something else, but you can't really, truly stop being you. You can't detach from parts of you that make up your actual organic existence. And so that is, I think, why an opposition. And of course, if we go to theology, even God at is Satan, right? Every deity or every imagined supreme being has its opposition. Why? Because this is at the core of man. If man wrote the gods, and of course that to me is obvious, right? If man made, imagined, fabricated the gods, even for this purpose, to create obstacles and to create that sort of motivation, man put himself in the gods, right? That's why all the gods, if you look at it, they behave like men, right? They have all the anthropomorphic characteristics of personality and even sometimes of depiction, right? Um, they resemble man, at least they have some resemblance to man, and so the motivation has to always be there, and that motivation, I think, is oppositional because of the rejection that is taking place, of the shadow material that we want to leave behind, because if we leave it behind, with it is also the responsibility of who we are. And so like I said, it seems like for the majority of mankind, if you like, the weight of that responsibility is far harder to bear than all the obstacles that you can put in perception in your path, in this regard, right? So it is like you've stated and like you've said about that conversation with Eros, that man doesn't want this power, but he only doesn't want this power because he rejected, in my opinion, the
Yeah,
responsibility of the wholeness of who he is,
exactly.
right? Because man looks around and sees that he's unique in that sense. Yes, he in a biological sense, he is more or less like a whole group of animals, or almost all the animals. So there is an animal part to man. I'm not disputing that, right? But it is also unique because it has this ability of the abstract, right? Of looking, like I said, to an horizon and saying, yeah, what is beyond that? I know that there will be something beyond that. I just need to go there, right? And if man wanted that responsibility, the natural objects would not natural objects, the natural obstacles would be more than enough for a motivator, let's say. But we rejected those natural obstacles because we didn't want the responsibility, and so created make-believe ones.
But this also, as well, to tease out that analogy again of
Mm.
the merry-go-round or the carousel or even the Ferris wheel or the toroid. Why do people go on the carousel? Well, it's fun, right? Well, why would you not just, I don't know, go on some sort of pony ride or what have you, right? Why do
Mhm.
they go on this sort of artificial contraption which just takes them around and around and around? Well, it's ultimately because of the security. It's
Yes.
safe,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And so they don't have to necessarily think about where they're riding the mechanical horse.
Yes.
They know that the thing is going to come back. So what it does is it provides almost an artificial, in a psychological sense, purely psychological sense, it produces almost an artificial sensation of the natural flux that you would have within the development of the ego, right?
Yes.
Or the strengthening of it. You go basically through the magnum opus. Multiple times a day. Of course, you'll have even grand magnum opuses, um, maybe along 7 to 10 year time frames. Of course, we also have the idea of the Saturn return on your 29th or 30th year. So it's the idea that you're constantly going through this shape-shifting motion, right? Man is capricious. This is why Yahweh was clearly written. I mean, he is the most evident character throughout all mythology that was clearly written by man. Probably several men actually, but you can see he is this capricious, schizophrenic character, and people are saying he's absolute. Look how evil he is. Even I've said it before. Look how evil he is. No, really, what we should be saying is, look how human he is. He is probably the most human deity out of all of the deities, including Odin and Thor, and they're quite.
And
Believe you me, they're quite human as
and,
well. But yeah.
and it's personifying exactly the rejection that man is feeling, and that's why he projected onto
Exactly.
these characters the same traits, right? Because God absolutely rejects what it labels as evil. But again, I say, if he created everything, and listen, it was, this character was written with these traits. You know, he is the creator of everything. He is omnipotent. He is omniscient. He, all of that. And however, evil exists, right? And his opposition exists. So how can an opposition exist if a perfect being creates everything? It means that the opposition also came from that being, right? And so, of course, that what man is projecting there is saying that, I've made my own Satan, let's say, in a metaphorical sense. I've made my own opponent and adversary to give me a motivation to play this make believe game, because I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
the perfect
Yeah.
God that is envisioned as the end result of this. Because the idea is that at the end, God will win, right, and defeat Satan, and everything is peace and blissful, and for those who are righteous, of course. But the thing here is, why do you need that process? Why do you, if the idea is to reach that bliss and peace, why did you need that? Because the
Exactly.
beginning point already contained that bliss and that peace and that marvelous and all of that, right? So why didn't it create it immediately? Why the opposition? And this is the way that man found to have something to do, in the sense of to do within that limited framework. Man pretends he is small, he is a dwarf I'm not talking biologically. Man pretends he is a dwarf that wants to grow tall, right? And the thing is, when man looks, beyond the mask, he has been the tallest. Right? But he put that limitation there because he can't handle. Didn't want the responsibility that comes with being tall, with being
He,
big, with being powerful.
he was a dwarf with a long shadow, but he just
Yes.
ignored
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
no,
Long shadow, indeed. Yeah.
I agree. It's also as well. It almost seems as though this is the nature of man himself. There's only there. I'm talking as a mass, and in terms of the species, but it's almost like we reject. We are constantly in a sort of consternation with ourselves. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this rejection between what we are and what we believe we could become. And
Yeah.
like what you're stating, these religious myths are the most laughable, because if man is seeking after paradise, paradise by its definition, in pretty much every mythology known to man, um, is this place of disillusion. It's a place of ego death, if you will. It's a
Mm-hmm.
place where one,
And of
it's
zero responsibility, by the way.
zero responsibility, yes.
Yes.
And basically the idea, it's the similitude of coming in after a long day of hard work and knowing you'll never have to work again and you've got nothing to do on the to-do list. That's basically paradise. And so this reflects supposedly what we had in the beginning. But the issue is that, like what you're stating, why do you have to have all of this cacophonous chaos up to that point to establish that? And how can chaos establish a place of irresolute, unabridging order, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
not order, but disillusion. So it's what you're really seeing here. You're not seeing something that's a prophetic journey, an eschatology, though it can play out that way geopolitically, because man, again, is sort of possessed by these hyperstitions, so he makes these things come to pass in his own sort of weird and psychically twisted way. But what you're seeing is ultimately a deep-seated psychological delusion in man, a malady, and wherein man is constantly rejecting and not taking responsibility for his own nature. I'm not necessarily saying his nature is evil, but what his nature is multifaceted, and you can't accept one part and then reject the next.
The other, yes.
Exactly. Everything has to be holistically intertwined, and in a weird way. So the reason I brought up, I actually wanted to show this this image, because there's more to what we're seeing here in IPEC Goat 2 that reflects with this this Manly P. Hall image. If I can find it, where the hell did I save it? It should be here. Wait,
We are having technical difficulties. We'll return to the regular broadcast in a few moments.
Give me a second. I'll just save it from here. But this is actually a very important piece to show. Right. There we go. Right, I'll show it now. Right, that should be it there. Yeah, so as you can see here, you see that sort of Bifrost bridge. So this individual is coming out of a sort of spire or a mountain. You could say the Rupus Nigra, the Black Rock at the center of, this mythologized central rock that established all of the magnetic patterns throughout Earth. But you'll notice as well, and of course Mount Meru and all of this as well, Mount Olympus, so on and so forth. But you'll notice as he reaches the fatal slope, this character doesn't come out of the top of the mountain like what you're saying. He comes out of the birth canal at the bottom of the mountain, right at the base of the mountain, almost as though he's went through multiple caverns to get into this sort of, if you will, this hollow earth idea, right, where he's went into another world, a world within a world. Again, this is all metaphorical, but it just shows this point. So what you're seeing here with this sort of these two eyes that are, of course, encircled by rainbows, you see the Bifrost Bridge. Now, the Bifrost Bridge typically was to take you to higher realms, but you'll notice here, it's actually taking the individual who's reached the top of the mountain, taking them back to the roots, the chaotic roots, the void, if you will, of this tree, of this Yggdrasil. And right there you see the entwined serpent of the Orphic egg, or the as it's called in Norse mythology, Nidogr, which is the serpent which gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil. So what's interesting about this is that it's almost like, firstly, man himself doesn't want to transcend the enclosed space.
Correct.
They like the merry-go-round. So the demiurge, if you will, quote-unquote demiurge, or Yaldabaoth, basically us, our own Geist, as Eros has stated it as well, and the active intellect. Basically, it hijacks our own enlightenment, and it takes us back to, well, firstly, it takes us to a great reset, takes us to the omega point, which we believe is a transcendence point, but in fact, it's just a transitional point to another sort of epoch, another world, a recreated world, or even a
And the
world within the world. Yeah, jump
and
in.
the most important thing about these depictions such as this, which is actually a beautiful piece of art, really, is that it's a closed system. That is, it has a central point, like I've stated before, and it is enclosed. It is a closed system. And it is closed exactly because man is avoiding, or if you want to put it that way, rejecting its natural, organic, healthy urge to seek the horizon, to seek beyond the horizon, let's say, not the horizon per se as if it's a fixed point, but beyond the horizon, to explore life. You understand? Because I think that man realized one thing sometime in the past, which was that what lies beyond the horizon is not fixed. It's not the one thing. It is what lies within us. And man has seen things that he wasn't comfortable with. Has seen things in the beyond those horizons that he wasn't comfortable with because he was actually seeing what lies beyond his self-image. Right. So what belongs to him and is reflected by the world, world, the external reality that is in him. And so the best way to avoid that, because if there's one thing that we can be sure about mind characters, is that mind characters will find the most incredible ways to reject confrontation with its own rejection, right? And with the things that it's uncomfortable with. And, the uncomfortable part can come from a myriad of different experiences. But nonetheless, it is rejected and it is uncomfortable. And so I think that man enclosed the world. Man made the world smaller and made himself smaller in the process, of course, because I think man and world are interconnected. This is what I'm trying to imply. Because of what he saw that, was distasteful to his self image. That is why God is distasteful towards what he considers to be evil. And of course, evil, I'm not saying that evil doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that evil can grow to a grotesque proportion the more it is rejected. If it is not rejected, this is what I observe, it never gets to a grotesque proportion. It may be uncomfortable. You may have to deal with it. You may have to even sternly deal with it, right? But it doesn't become that grotesque imagery that man has about evil, right? This is why, um, everything that you dislike or you feel uncomfortable with, from whatever your perspective is within this enclosed space of perception, is always projected onto that particular enemy. And it can be that particular enemy can be a people, a race, a religion, another god, or another entity, supernatural entity. It can be whatever that is agreed upon within that particular culture, but it is always projected. All the things that you reject about yourself are projected onto that enemy. And that, of course, is far more comfortable as an avoidance than to say, hang on, I have the same things that I imagine these other uh, have, right? And the thing is, those urges that were distasteful to the self image are actually organic, healthy urges that have a healthy place, But the more they are rejected, like I said, you can't move on. You can't stop being the entirety of you. And so it will come back to haunt you. It will come back to message you. And when I say haunt you, is not like, ooh, ghosts, is in the sense of you cannot pretend I don't exist as a part of you. Period. That is the message at the end of the day. You know, you cannot pretend that these parts are not a part of you. If there is anyone that would claim because of moral um, standards that are culturally applied, that, for example, I would never kill. Yes, you would. I would never lie. Yes, you would. Right? And there are healthy places for these things. There is a healthy time to kill. There is a healthy time to lie. There is a healthy time, for all the things that you can morally frame as good and evil. There is a healthy time for that. But the more you reject it, the more you are exposed to its grotesque side. You understand what I'm trying to say? You can never stop being you.
Well, yes, I mean, human beings have to be aware of not, like what you're saying, not just their good side, but they have to be aware as well of their evil side. If you don't bring the two into an equilibrium, and if you don't understand that you yourself are merely, a week away, perhaps even less, from becoming a ravenous beast, because believe you me, as you see when hunger takes over,
Mhm.
or any of these instinctual drives, things come out of you, out of oneself, that is, that oneself may not have even been aware lurked there in their soul. So it's like what you're saying as well. There's a healthy place for these things. Um, you just simply have to develop the right mechanism for dealing with them. Like what you're saying too, as we see within our own anarcho-tyrannical states within Europe, they're allowing crime to go, effectively unmitigated, right? And so you're getting more and more and more chaos. This is of course all planned, but ultimately, what you're seeing here is that eventually will sort of boil over, and it will affect a response, but the response itself will be an extreme. And so, for example, taking it back to ideologies themselves, you see, and you brought up a very great point, which is that these ideologies require the obstacles, right? The progressives don't want to get rid of white supremacists. They love white supremacists. There wouldn't be Antifa or any progressive sort of mindset without that obstacle there.
Because it's their enemy. Yes. Yes.
And even
Yeah.
if they can't find it within the environment, they will create white supremacy,
Yes.
which is interesting in and of itself as a sort of twisted psychological
Mhm.
irony. But what you're seeing here is that ultimately all they desire is a vessel to pour all of their scorn and their hate. Their
Yes.
hate and scorn for what? Well, their hate and scorn for their own self, right?
Yes.
Eventually, it comes down to that. And of course, you see the same thing with the MAGA.
Mhm.
And what you're seeing, and you see the same thing with religion, all of it. All of it is ultimately, I mean, for example, I myself come from sort of the conservative right wing, right? I guess historically speaking, right? Maybe 10 years ago or what have you. I know deep down that all of the problems that the right wing complain about, constantly complain about, they complain about bad policy, lowering demographics, immigration, all of this. Ultimately, the reason for these things um, is because no one complained about the sort of liberality that they were all endorsing, which supposedly all of these alt-right or right-wing characters were endorsing in the 90s, right? They came into the 2000s, they came into the 2010s. They went, oh God, right. It just didn't stay, at the sort of liberal stagnancy of the 90s. It didn't just ossify there. It's went into this continuum. We've got this weird and wonderful wacky culture that they have no, they're no longer, most people as well can no longer even sort of abide by it. But ultimately, all of the problems that they blame on other people are caused by their own apathy up to this point, their own inactivity. And
Yeah,
yeah,
well, in part, but I would say that, and since we're talking the right wing,
mm,
or conservative, if you like, I think that their enemy is generated by their extreme rejection of the difference. What I mean to say by this is that even their own offspring would perhaps have a natural healthy urge to explore beyond the boxed in conservative idea of their culture, right? Because children,
mm-hmm,
especially children, are born very, they want to know, they want to explore, they want to see, right? And they are immediately boxed in, and they are boxed in so much that when they get the chance, they will rebel. And they will rebel to what? To the exact opposite. So they become reactionary to the initial constrictive
mm-hmm,
premise that they were born in, right? So I think that the right wing, the way the right wing generates their enemy, is that they constrict the difference. And when I say differences, it could be, a difference of behavior, difference of thought, difference of action, difference of even the clothes you wear, whatever, difference of language, difference of skin color, difference of whatever. But they constrict it and restrict it so much that as soon as it's possible, the those exposed to it will rebel and, of course, reactionarily become the opposite, right?
mm-hmm,
And then, of course, on the other side, they become grotesquely liberationists, or whatever you want to call it, like anything goes and anything
exactly.
is right, because it is also a rejection of any kind of limitation, right? So both live
Do
in this
do
dance of, yeah,
do you not find it? Absolutely, it's a dance. It's almost like the beating of a heart. But do you notice it's very strange as well now, which is that the sort of liberalism that you're seeing, quote unquote liberalism or what have you, that has become almost puritanical in its limiting
of course, yeah,
effect. And you're getting the reactionary. Again, this is all planned, but
the
here's
Caesar
another.
Legion, the Caesar Legion.
Well, here's another weird thing about this,
Mm,
which is that I remember, sort of, going about the right wing circles, and they're constantly complaining about lowering demographics of, quote unquote, white Europeans.
mhm,
And you speak to a lot of these people. I'm not saying it's all. There are a few right wingers out there that have, a whole brood of children, but most of them have maybe at the most two children, right?
mhm,
Zero, but most of them have zero children, right? Um, the sort of the white right wing male and females, they're about as infertile, if you will. Um, I don't use that in a sort of derogatory term, but they're about as infertile or non-prolific as the liberals that they supposedly oppose. And I always found this very, very strange, very weird. And it's again, it's this thing they don't want to take accountability or responsibility for their actions up to this point. Um, and it's almost this continual rejection. Of course, this is a political way in which they reject, but yeah, jump in.
and isn't it funny that the way that they find the solution, supposed solution, imaginary solution that they find to that problem, is again restriction. You have to restrict women. You have to go back to, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, the times before women could vote and the times before women could have jobs and the place of the, because if that was the time, then
Yeah.
women, even arranged marriages and so on, because at that time, the women would be at the disposal of men to be the brood mothers, like you said, right?
Yeah.
To generate and that is their solution. And also, one thing that they don't see is that they accuse the left of being collectivist, which they are, no doubt. But they themselves are then collectivists in their own way, because they say, okay, um, the problem is not a problem of underpopulation, it is a problem of underpopulation of this specific race, right? So they are collectivists to their race. They are not individualists. They do not see a person as an individual. They see a person as the determined features of a collective point of view, right? Oh, you're Indian, then you must be this, that, and the other, and right. So they don't even see the individual. They see immediately a collective stereotype, if you like, a collective idea of what that person is. And of course, these two sides, left and right, to their extremes, they are in a dance, like I was saying,
Yeah.
because they need each other to exist. You said, and very rightly, that the left needs the conservatives, because without the conservatives, they just cease to exist. And I think that they even consume themselves, right? They need, because the
Oh
object of
yeah.
hatred stops existing, so they start
Yeah.
realizing that what actually is happening is
The
that they hate.
turfs and all of this. Yeah.
Yeah, they hate themselves, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and on the right, it's the same thing, because without that enemy, they can't justify their ideology, in the sense, their ideals of what life should be. But they both generate the Frankenstein monster that haunts them, and they need that Frankenstein monster to exist. It's not like they're trying to defeat the monster, really. They're just trying to hurt it enough, and to even anger it enough to cause a reaction, excuse me, from the monster, so
Mm-hmm.
that they have a wrestle. You know, they have a wrestle. Why do um, people like fight sports? And even football is a fight sport, soft fight, but a fight sport, right? It's a simulated battle, basically, right? Why do people like these things? They like it because it gives them a vent, a steam valve for exactly that self-hatred that grows from the rejection of the parts of themselves that they couldn't integrate. Not that they couldn't in the sense of ability, but they wouldn't. They refused to integrate it in a healthy manner.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course these things are engineered because the philosopher kings, if you will, that rule the script writers, whatever, that rule the society, they know these things come about.
Mhm.
And I think as well, a lot of these political, the political infight and the binaries that they've created themselves, eventually, as you see within politics, it has to become more and more and more extreme, to titillate the masses, to so sort of suppress that, like what you're saying, that rejection deeply, that's deep seated within their own being. Um, and of course, this is being accelerated and facilitated by social media as well. Ultimately, if they can keep everyone at each other's throats, you don't necessarily see that, the changing of the scenery, if you will, to the to
Mm.
the new to the new scene. Um, there was something else I was going to mention regarding this. I had the notes here. Yeah. So the idea of the Satyr Repotenet Opera Rotas, and what we were discussing here with the hijacking of the Bifrost Bridge, pardon. So the Satyr Repotenet Opera Rotas, Martin Fleischmann, the way he translates, I have a different translation, but he translates it as Satyr, where we get the term Saturn from. And by the way, this is broken Latin, the Satyr Repotenet Opera Rotas. It's probably broken Latin written by Hebrew. Um, there's several linguistic experts that have weighed in on this and stated as such. But anyway, Satyr, where we get the term Saturn from, cedar, the cedar A rep O. So from the beginning repeatedly to the end, tenet opera rotas, or um, he he uh, he maintains the wheel through through the whirlwind, through manipulation vis-a-vis the whirlwind, or of course that of the toroid. So the idea that it's expressing there is that ultimately everything is an enclosed loop, right? Now this is an interesting thing to graffiti. I think the first one was found in Pompeii, right? So this is an interesting thing just to graffiti anyway. But the idea is that man becomes. You even see it, for example, in Apollo 11. Man constantly, anything that man touches, right? It must be within this world that he has built,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This toroid, this sphere. Anything he is the seeder of it all, because he seeds it with the imaginal potential, which then hatches and births worlds within worlds within worlds. Even with Apollo, what we see there, well, firstly, I mean, it's based on a Kabbalistic prophecy where the idea is that um, the children of Israel, or the righteous, the Zadik, as they're called, they are carried on the wings of the eagle up to heaven. You even see the same thing with the Great Seal of the United States of America, probably why America was founded, in the nucleus of a world empire, this idea. But with Apollo, you even see Nixon as well mentioning that man has made his nest within the heavens. Now, it's quite interesting, that terminology. Man has made his nest within the heavens, implying man is the eagle. We even see the eagle actually here in this image. It's sort
Mm-hmm.
of this transcendent vector, and then above that is the phoenix bird, or the I forget what the one here that's utilized, but it's basically the phoenix. So the idea is that man, everything that man goes to, or even space itself, it
Mm-hmm.
must be within the orbit of his own imagination, right?
Yes.
That's the reason that Apollo went off without a hitch, because it was imagined as such on a studio, or in a studio rather, right? Because
Right.
they couldn't die there, because to die there would be to break this potential for the vent, right? Because people would feel constrained. They would feel, oh my God, I can't. We can't expand. We can't explore. We can't get
The
out of the
only
mundane.
one, the only
Jump
one
on.
that died was the Challenger.
Oh yes, yes.
That was the only one that
Yeah.
didn't make it. But in this drawing here, that bird that you see atop, that is actually man. Man is outside of the system there, you see? So that is the
Yeah, his
spirit of
head.
man. Yes, that is the spirit of man. Man is outside, but pretending to be not only inside, but pretending that he is the enclosed space, let's say, the enclosed perception of what the world is. But man is actually sitting outside and above or beyond, if you like, the limitations of its own perception. So man is aware of that. I think man is aware that he is pretending, but refuses to acknowledge and you know confront and integrate that rejection because it can't it doesn't feel capable of dealing with the responsibility of being outside of that. And it's like what you said, it has to do with predictability, it has to do with security. You prefer to go on the merry-go-round or the Ferris wheel than, explore. You prefer. You prefer the security of that you're there for 1 minute or whatever it is that the ride is, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, doesn't matter. And then it will stop and you come out and you go on
Yes.
with your pretense life, right?
Even with Apollo, it felt like it was the dissimulation of exploration, but it
Hmm.
wasn't exploration itself.
Hmm.
Ultimately, because there was, like as we're stating here, and as everyone should know watching this, it was created within a closed set, and so everything you're seeing. I mean, even for example, the foundations of all of these various nations, they were created by closed sets of boards, right? Basically, boardroom meetings, and from there, everything was drawn up. The declarations of independence of these various nations, the constitutions, they were drawn up by men of either the legal profession, the financial profession, or of course, substantial property owners, right? Landowners, so landlords. So you're dealing with these systems that provide the dissimulation of things, be it freedom, or all of these sorts of vague abstractions of liberty, or civil liberty, or whatever, and that of course, exploration itself. This allows for the venting of man, right? To show, look, this is not an enclosed system. We can go beyond it, right? You even see the same thing with political ideologies, right? Where the left are given an event which makes them feel for a week or two as though they're on the ascendancy, and then the right wing will be given the next 2 weeks after that will be given their event to make them feel as though they're on the ascendancy. So it keeps them on the gravy train, like what we're stating here. But that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that. But
Yeah,
you'll
and
notice its head is outside of the system, so it's almost like
yeah.
the system itself is established by the predatory Geist, or the mind, the active intellect, which artificiates the ego.
Yeah, you could even argue that the treetops there are the wings of that bird. In a
Yes.
of course symbolical sense, they could be seen as the extensions, at least, or the sort of imagine the bird that has the wings, um, you know, circling down, or whatever. I don't know what the word is, and it would form those treetops. It could also be represented that way, but the idea there is, yes, that the bird is above, and therefore the spirit of man knows very well that it's more than that encapsulated system, but the encapsulated system gives it predictability, and that predictability is worth more to man, to the mind characters, I must say, of man, than the continuous attempts of the ego to uh, tell man that, hey, you can't really leave this behind. And man, the mind character says, no, but I can't deal with that. And the more it can't deal, the more grotesque it becomes within its own systems, which is interesting.
Yes, that's very interesting.
And also
It's
note, you were talking about space exploration. Also note that even in the narratives, the idea behind the accomplishment of space exploration is that to explore space, so to go beyond the bubble of reality, of perceived reality, let's say, we have to become collectivists. That has been the message for a long time. You see it with Star Trek, for example. It is also, of course, in the story itself of the lunar missions, which has a heavy influence from Jules Verne, in my opinion. It is a collective effort. And if you remember, I don't know if you read the Jules Verne novels about going to the moon. It is an
no.
entirely worldwide collective effort to build it. In his case, it was a cannon. They built a mega super giant cannon
Oh
that would
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
would fire a bullet capsule kind of thing that would contain the astronauts, and then they would land on the moon. But regardless, the idea there is that it was a collective worldwide effort. So first, we must unite as a collective, and then we can go beyond the sphere. Why? Because if we unify as a collective, then the unpredictability of the individual goes away, and so it's safe, and we can pretend that we go beyond, because you can't really go beyond as a collective. That's absolutely impossible.
It's also interesting as well with the stags. So within the predatory architecture below this of the eagle, you'll see the stags. They go through what appears to be like 5 stages. I'd need to have a look at that really, but I'm sure that probably relates to some form of if you will, sort of how the soul, because the stag is always associated with the soul within the esoteric world, how the stag acts as it goes through these various cycles as well. You also see the stag. It's I believe it's made an appearance again in Disclosure Day, or maybe it's another movie.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I unfortunately endured Disclosure
Oh,
Day
did you?
recently. Yes, and
Was it bad?
it's, oh my god, it's so bad.
Oh God.
It's I mean, but when I say bad, it's not just the message. I mean, it's bad movie making, truly. Because okay, I can admire a propaganda movie knowing that it's propaganda, knowing that all of those things, if it's well done. I mean, I can appreciate. Yeah, listen, the script was actually good. The acting was great. All of these things. That movie is poor. It's simply poor. Things that don't make sense, things that were hammered into the story, clearly hammered into the story, like we must fit this in because we need this particular bit of message there, and you clearly see that was hammered into the script. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like, it doesn't flow
It didn't feel
um
natural. It feels as
natural.
though it's
Yeah,
disjointed. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And it was really poor. But yeah, it did make an appearance. So there were aliens that pretend or masked their forms as animals, and one of those animals were deer or stags or whatever you
Interesting.
want to call it. Yeah.
You see the same thing in Leave the World Behind. Of course, they're not necessarily aliens, but what it seems to indicate is that, like what we see with the Native American prophecies as well, relating to stags, is that it's a sort of portent of things to come.
Hmm.
And it's sort of to take a crack at this. I mean, if we were to view this as the stages of the various sections of an epoch, right? Be it of whatever extent. So the one on the far left looks as though it's sort of like it's this neutral stance of the deer. It's a deer that is just mere, you could say, emerged onto the world stage,
If
right?
it's on the far left, it's a non-binary stack. Yeah.
It's a non-binary stag, so it's yes, exactly, and you so it's very neutral. It's very neutral, yeah.
Yes.
And then the one to the sort of mid left, you'll
Hmm.
notice that it tilts its head up, so it's in an extension phase. It's looking towards the edge of the canopy. Um, it's You could view it as perhaps an escalation of the intellect or of friction itself, of a pioneering attitude, this sort of outburst phase of a civilization, that type of idea. And then you'll see at the sort of middle, the middle one, to the right of the eagle's feet.
Hmm.
He looks very proud, very almost boisterous, I guess would be the term. You could say that is perhaps the zenith of the cycle, the zenith of the consumption of the cycle. And then as it falls back down, you've got the sort of a decline. It's perhaps a decline because, as you can see, the stag is no longer looking to, it's no longer gaining sustenance from the heavens, if you will. It's gaining sustenance from the ground. So it's in a sort of digestive phase, an exhaustive phase. It's seeking to find sustenance for its soul wherever it can, from the corpuscles or the morsels that it can find on the the floor of the forest. And then, of course, stage 5 is there's a squirrel there as well. I'm not sure what that would mean, but you'll notice
I
with
was just noticing that, actually. I was just going to
yeah.
ask you to zoom in on that because, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I just noticed that there, but you'll notice in the 5th one there that would be like the, see, when you line up a shot, the perfect shot for a stag or a deer, that's basically where that's the shot, because
Hmm.
what you're trying to do is you're trying to hit it, in between the shoulder blades, so it pierces the heart and basically kills it stone dead. That's pretty much the shot that you're seeing. So it's almost like the terminal, the terminal point, the anchor of the harvest, if you will, right? It's, and of course, as you can see, it's facing backwards to the beginning. The
And
first stag is facing forward.
being on the right, that stag, isn't he missing a bit of the ear? No,
God, your
I'm
eyes
just
are better
kidding.
than mine.
I'm just kidding.
Oh
Because the shot.
yes, yes, you're right. Sorry, I totally forgot about that. Yes, that's hilarious. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, I got trumped there.
Yeah.
But
Sorry
yeah,
to
so
interrupt you, but
so
sometimes
that would be basically, so
yeah.
that's my take on it. Just looking at it, just there, thinking about it for
Mm.
about a second. But um, yeah, the squirrel. I wonder what that indicates. That looks very much like, actually, the oh God, what's the thing in Norse mythology? Ratatoskr, I believe
Mm.
is how you pronounce it. And oh God, how to describe that? Basically, this, I forget what it is in the Norse myth, but the idea is that it runs up and down Yggdrasil. It's almost like, it's like Mercury in a sense, or
I
Hermes.
see.
It's
Okay.
like like the nervous system within the manifested physical world, or of our own body. So it carries, Ratatoskr carries slander and gossip, between the bottom of Nidogr,
Mm.
the Midgard, and of course Asgard, and the upper realms. So perhaps that's what you're seeing here. It's very similar in its positioning to that of the, um what's that tarot card, the star tarot card, with the Thoth ibis perched on the tree. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I yeah.
Yeah, and this is a representation of the human psyche, of course. That's why it's
Yes.
made encapsulated. And of course, the upper realms are entirely dependent on the lower realms. And of course,
Mm,
the argument is that man lives in between, so in the Midgard. I would say that no, I think man lives in the lower regions in what would be the subconscious. But as you know, my opinion, I think that what we call conscious is actually subconscious, because there is a consciousness above it that is far more expansive than the conscious as we know it. And so those are the roots that sustain the psyche, where man lives, where the mind characters live, alongside that serpent, and those the that world of darkness, and of course here darkness in the sense of not knowing about it himself, or of self knowledge, let's say. And so the idea there is, in my opinion, if you let go, if the mind character is able to let go of this attempt at control, and this attempt at rejection of the fullness of who he is, the mind character is able to then connect to the ego that is, in my opinion, that mountain over there, because it's in between the essence of the bird, the eagle, and the lower serpent, let's say, and reach, let's say, the fullness of the eagle. So the eagle can the healthy way for this to work would be the eagle communicates or lands on the mountain, and the
Yeah.
mountain then communicates, let's say, then trickles down the blessings, if you like, towards the serpent, because the serpent is a part of the psyche. It's not an outsider, it's not an invader, it's not an external, it is a part of it. But the serpent thinks it's the only thing, it's the most important thing, it's the one that is, and even has this feeling of being rejected, of course, of being cast down like Satan onto the lower realms. And so what we see here is, if it's able to let go of that idea of control and of that idea of keeping away the rejected, then it can communicate, let's say, with the mountain. And there's, of course, countless images and depictions of holy mountains all over the world,
Of course,
and
yeah.
that is, of course, a one of the main symbols. I mean, almost every, not every, but almost every culture has its own version of the holy mountain, right? Of a mountain that has some sort of mystical significance, and therefore reach and integrate again with the eagle of the eagle. But the only problem is that it's rejecting that connection by trying to maintain the lower realms in the safety, in the perception of safety. So that is another interpretation for this, as I see it.
What's also interesting about the mounting is the mountain as well, is that um, if I recall correctly, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's with the New Age theosophy, some of the Pan-Sophic movement as well, which is Rosicrucianism,
Mm.
all the way to basically Masonry, all the mystery, the Western esoteric mystery schools that were founded in between that sort of 300 year period. What you find is that when they talk about the precursor civilization and its collapse, Atlantis or Shambhala, or whatever terminology they use, that the refugees went to the mountain, and it was from there that they were given the light to carry back down to earth, which
Mm-hmm.
is, rather interesting. You see this in a lot of esoteric and, of course, exoteric philosophies and religions. Another one as well, is that El Shaddai, which people translate as God Almighty, it's not God Almighty. If you look at the Semitic language in its roots, it actually comes from an Akkadian epithet for Marduk, which was Bel Shadesh, which means Shadesh literally means of the mountain. So Bel, the master or the lord of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So El Shaddai is the god of the mountain. In fact, we even see this in Deuteronomy, where it says that Yahweh came from the mountains. He
Rex
um,
Mundi, yeah. Mm-hmm.
the Rex Mundi, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
and he, I believe it's in Exodus or something like that. But the Israelites are dying of thirst, and from the rocks spring forth with water. And I believe there's another idea in the Old Testament regarding the rocks, bursting forth, fracturing forth with milk, right?
Mm.
So it's the idea that the rock satiates oneself, which is interesting when you start to look at that from a sort of Masonic point of view, right? With the hewn stone and the jagged rock and the perfect ashlar and all of this. So that's carried on. It's also carried on with Jacob's pillow stone and all of this, even the Betelgeuse stones and so on and so forth. But you're perfectly correct there in stating that. You also see it in the Abraxas stones of IAO, which itself is this sort of three-headed god
Mm.
figure, or the trimorph, or the tria prima, which is that the eye, well, of course the triangle is the developed thought, developed into this sort of generative symbol. And then, of course, the O is exactly what we're stating. It's the stagnancy, which people believe to be the utopia or the perfect, but ultimately is just it's a simulation of progress rather than
Hmm.
progress itself. But the eye itself is interesting because the eye is drawn out from the point, similar to what you see here. So that point would be the light. That is the pure potential. It's the unconditional and eternal space. The point without the circle without a circumference, the point without a place. So it's this potential that's then drawn down into the idea, which is Greek for thought, which establishes the mountain. The mountain itself is the foundational pillar. It's both the tower, which is the hubristic
Hmm.
example of our own ego, and it's also the foundation of the world, which we see below with the of course the roots and the branches of the serpent. You'll notice as well that each of those branches, the ones above in the heavens, are of a sort of triangle or generative symbol. And then the ones below are also a triangle or generative symbol. However, the ones below are in the shape of course, a downward triangle, and the ones above are in the shape of an upward triangle. Interestingly, with the Shin letter, which means destruction or devouring in its pictographic meaning, in 2 Kings 21:7, the name of the Lord is etched into Jerusalem, and it is in the shape of that, those that W shape, or those three branches. Even Kennedy was shot in Dealey Plaza, which is in the shape of that too. So the idea is, you see it with Shiva too, the destroyer, his Trishula, Poseidon, the Rex Mundi. Poseidon means, of course, Lord of the Earth in Attic Greek. He has the trident as well. So the idea is that ultimately, I think that all of these civilizations, when they get to the circle, if you will, the IAO, when they get to that final terminal stage where they just want to go round the merry-go-round, or the Ferris wheel, or to ride the Leviathan, if you will, round and round it goes, right? Um, they've already ultimately surrendered um, their soul, if you will. They've sold
Hmm.
their soul, either wittingly or unwittingly, and ultimately they're existing within the system of a Rex Mundi that believes that he controls the past, the present, and the future, but he controls it in a sort of retrocausal way. So he controls the past by writing the future, and that itself
Yeah.
controls the present. It steadies the present. So this is ultimately what I'm thinking these symbols are actually imparting upon the observer.
And it's
Um,
and it's an outsourcing job, because the demiurge did not. This is my view again, as I've stated before, did not come from any external, but was outsourced this particular job, the job of defining the game that man would play. And that all stems from man not wanting to be the game master, let's say. So, oh yeah, right. We were talking about iPet Goat. Yes, well done. We still have ten
well,
minutes or so.
we do, yes.
We did a slight detour. So as you can see, this is not the last episode, just like I predicted.
Yes, you're
Um,
correct. You were
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Something to mention as well, just lastly here, is that you'll notice that the blood flow. So he's got a deathly expression on his face, and you'll notice um, there's blood that's flowing from. It looks like blood that's flowing from his neck. It's almost like his neck's been gashed open, and you'll notice it's flowing down into a spiral. Now, one way to sort of understand that is it's flowing down. Again, the tauroctony has occurred. This bull has had its throat slit, but the way that this works is that it's almost, if you will, a sort of frozen tauroctony. the demiurge freezes it, right? He manages the chaos, if you will. He directs the chaos as a vector quantity towards the if you will, the metempsychosis of the system itself.
Mm.
So when that blood flows, it flows only so far as it creates another circle, or it generates another circle. He doesn't let it flow any further, because of course he would lose his control of this realm. It would go down too many levels, if you will, psychically or psychologically. And he, of course, would lose his grip on reality, his grip of control, which he so, of course, devilishly seeks. So that's what I would say to that. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that scene, or we can move on.
Well, no, just in general to say, and really quickly, because I know we only have 10 minutes to at least move another scene, but it is that the necessity of providing, I think we've also discussed this in the past, the necessity of providing different masks at different times for the game itself, for the perception, the worldview itself, is because if things get stagnant for long enough, the interest goes away. It's like, you play video games, and you constantly perhaps start a new save on a game that you already know, because you want to experience it all over again, but having the objective, the motivator to do it. And perhaps the save that you are currently on, you already did, right? You already accomplished this quest and did that and obtained that relic and whatever it was. And so now the interest is lost. It became stagnant, right? So now you need a new challenge. So you press the new game button and you create a new character and you start over. So that's in general what I wanted to say. So you can move on with to the next scene at least a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, my apologies. Hold on. Sorry. There's you'll notice as well the lotus constantly keeps cropping up too.
Mm-hmm.
We've already went over this, but I find it interesting that this sort of crops up again here, and it's almost like, oh, pardon me, it's almost like what you're seeing here is that the lotus, the potential of the lotus emerged from the binary when Alice dropped that apple. It's almost like Alice was surrendering. She was surrendering to the, not necessarily the system, but she was surrendering to the idea that the system cannot be saved. It can't be reformed. And now we're seeing the lotus crop up again. But you'll notice the lotus is constantly within, and it's being satiated by the watery illusion itself. So we could even look at this as the subconscious or the unconscious.
Sure.
Like what we saw in that Manly P. Hall thing, it's being satiated by something that man can't necessarily put his finger on. It's a non-local thing, right? As Eros stated yesterday in a discussion, a hyper object. So it's this viscous thing that cannot necessarily be pinpointed in time or space by man, but man feels drawn to it, almost stuck to it. He can't escape it. It's almost like an electromagnetic pull. And I think this is what's being intimated there.
Jung would call it the collective subconscious. But also, since we're witnessing, or just before we were witnessing, the scene of the birth of the Savior, so he passes through the canal, right? The lotus also points towards Padmasambhava, which means the one born of the lotus. So the lotus was also a symbol of the birth of the Savior, or the world teacher, which, world teacher would be for the East, Savior would be for the West. But it's basically the same idea. So in this case, I think it's to note that he is born of the lotus. So as he passes, the lotus open up and emerge So he is. It's like he is born symbolically of that lotus. If
I
you don't
think
know
it,
about Padmasambhava in Buddhism, look it up. It's basically a very important mythological figure.
and you'll notice as well that he goes through into this. I guess you would call it the hand of God, right there. We're going to see the Scorpio at the other side, but he's going into the either sunrise or sunset. What's your take upon it? The sunrise, I would assume, yeah.
Yeah, sunrise of the new mask of the system that is being
Mm-hmm.
projected and reflected back onto the eyes of that vampire thingy that we were talking about previously. Yeah, but he is going there as a savior, as a world teacher, as the one that is incumbent of saving mankind from itself, basically. And that will be the role I think that will be presented for the AI divinity, let's say.
And we see here well, he's awakened.
Opens
Um,
his eyes. Yeah.
yeah, for almost the first time it would appear, um, and you'll like he was holding his breath, right, which would be the soul. Um, and you'll notice here that he's got fire in his eyes, so it's a
Hmm.
burning fire. Um, he's also got a fire here, so again, this is similar to this Osama bin Laden character. However, this is the sort of opposite of that. It's not the Negredo flame anymore. This would be the Rubedo flame,
Hmm.
the Sol Rubeda, the red sun. You'll notice too that he he also has the same markings on his face, similar to that woman that had Kesham and all of that, who was grabbed
Mm.
by the Baron Samedi. So it's almost like this character is embodying all of the scars, if you will, of everything that came before him. It's almost like he is an immortal. He's not necessarily a savior, as in he's the sort of um, he's the player character in the game. It's like what you were saying. He's starting another save file. It's not necessarily that he is saving the world. He is the character to
Mm.
bring that is brought. He is the original, if you will, the original blueprint that's brought into the new world to replay it again. Because of course he has a certain level of predictability to him. So in a sense, this is the system bringing in
Hmm.
the same sort of architecture that works and the same sort of archetype that works. And from there, they shall then rebuild and renew their strength and redirect their focus.
Right.
Um,
The re-rolled corporation. Yeah.
the re-rolled corporation, exactly. And you'll notice he's got this triangle. Um, so yeah, it's so you'll notice I don't know what your take is on this. What imagery do you think's being evoked here?
Well,
With this triangle.
that has been associated. Of course, that's the place of the third eye, but that has been associated in previous media formats as the pyramid with the capstone above it. So the capstone is not connected. So I think that
Hmm.
that is a symbol of the script writers, if you like, a symbol of the um, power structure per se, a symbol of, if you want to put it like that, of the Wizard of Oz, right? And so, of course, if I am correct in my interpretation, and I'm very stubborn with it, that this figure here is AI. Of course, you see that this AI came from and has the branding, let's say, of its maker, and it is conveyance, another conveyance of another update, if you like, of the same power structure that delineated the previous saviors, of which his physiognomy uh, um, brings to mind, right? One of them, at least. But note how he's wearing the barbed wire, so he is not of free mind. this AI is guardrailed. This AI is not sentient. This AI is a performative robot. Let's put it like that, or a performative LLM, if you like. Doesn't matter how well developed it might seem. It's still a computer program, basically, that is entirely contained and guardrailed in its mind. So in the way that it would react and respond to the world and to the questions that are asked, let's say, by humanity. But it is the one that will be presented to regulate it, because man doesn't want the responsibility.
I think you're correct there. There's one thing I would add to that, which is that
Mm,
the triangle is almost it's the symbol of the pyramid that never really wants to be finished. And so
mm,
what you're fundamentally seeing here with, for example, the eyes of fire and this pyramid, if you will, this architecture, or the architect, if you will, peering into and creating the, if you well, as you see here, the nine rays or the nine worlds. He establishes basically the totality of the confines of the pen, if you will, for the for the actual soul of man, which is of course symbolized by the eye,
mm,
the true inner eye, the true beingness of man that exists beyond this architecture. But you'll notice that if this affects that, and in doing so, it sort of brings man, hence the sort of fiery eyes, it brings man back into this sort of this Heraclitean flux, right? To steal a term,
mm,
it brings them into this um place of pardon me, this place of time, of the chaotic drives, of the sort of Hephaestian forge,
mhm,
of the
mhm.
crucible of civilization. So it brings them back into that. Um, it's similar to what you were saying. There's a dance to it, right?
Yeah.
There's a dance to all of this. It's exactly what they are. They are almost the composers or the orchestrators of this dance. And what the dance is trying to give birth to is a star, right? It is the actual savior, not the savior we're seeing here. It's like AI. I think you're spot on with this. You know, you have the A at the top and the I at the bottom. AI. It's the
Oh, well,
idea.
I didn't even think of that. Well done. Yeah.
Well, it's the idea of that man's soul. Well, this is the reason for AI. Man's soul is informed by the system directly now.
Right.
So man is completely colonized by the corporate overlord class. And so our horizons are now being limited vis-a-vis AI itself. That's what AI is designed to do. But again, like anything, it's a tool. But if
Yeah.
the tool becomes the master, then it no longer acts as a tool. It acts as a defining agent
Mhm.
of oneself, and diminishes one's sovereignty. Um, there's something else I've got written here in my notes. Yes, so the alchemical rubedo on this in alchemy, after escaping the illusory rainbow of the cauda pavonis or the Maya, the initiate must then reach the final stage, which is the rubedo or the red dawn, as we see in the Splendor Solace. This is the stage of absolute integrated reality. The fire in the eyes, of course, is the burning away of these hyper-real illusions of the previous age. Again,
Mm.
the pure thawing out of those hyper-real imagined illusions that have grown stagnant, thus consuming the dead wood of the hyper-objects. And this is why, by the way, you see, for example, um, this terminology, this sort of twilight language, this lang verte of carbon dioxide being the villain, right? Why
Mm.
carbon dioxide? Well, it's not necessarily the dioxide, it's the carbon. So the reduction of carbon, the net zero of carbon. Why? Because carbon ultimately is this reminder of this to the system that the world is of pure fire. It's of flux, if you will. So what they are attempting to do is create an omega point system, a system that doesn't move, that is just it's a perpetual carousel It's a simulated leviathan that never quite it never permits the individual to break free from the sedation of the digital terrarium.
Hmm.
So this is what ultimately, this is the hatred for carbon. This is where it stems from. Why carbon? Well, I should have mentioned this. The etymology of carbon is from carbo, which is a Latin word for charcoal. Charcoal is the product of the consummation, or the consumption rather, of dead wood. So that's something to mention there. You quite rightly mentioned he's actually going to lose that crown of barbed wire soon. Um, but what you're seeing there is that with the barbed wire, it was a sort of bounded ego. It was the Leviathan itself that went around the head. It was the thorns that stopped oneself from reaching the sweet sucra of the rose. Now that is gone, one can reach that. One can reach the integration of the ego, if you will, the individuation of the soul.
Hmm.
And another thing to mention is that the barbed wire also created a bleed out effect. A bleed out of what? Well, it bleeds out from the head. This blood, this coagulation of light, as we see in Kabbalah. And so ultimately, what it's bleeding out is almost the vacuums of meaning, the hyperstitions, the technologies, the simulations of thought that maintain the system and hold this sort of paradox together, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's another thing to mention there. We'll go into everything else, in the other episode. I think we'll be able to finish it on the 13th episode. So, uh,
Ha.
I know.
You still make those predictions. Well, what can we do? People believe, and beliefs take over. You have your belief that it will be the next. It's like those people that are waiting for the rapture. It's tomorrow. It's the next day. No. Just let it flow, man. You don't know when it's gonna when it's gonna end. You don't know when the rapture will come, and you'll get rid of this.
I'm retrocausally trying to rewrite the future,
Right.
or the
Right.
past rather. Oh man.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else I need to mention this. I'm just checking my notes here really quickly before we jump off from this. Oh yeah. So you'll notice it's the 9 rays. The 10th is that of the Keter of the triangle, and then of course the 11th is that of the eye, which is the Dat. So if the 10 is the number of perfect completion, 11, of course, would be the number of transgression. It would also perhaps be the number of um, sort of the satanic adversarial force, right? The nine is associated in Kabbalah with Yesod, which is the foundation. Yesod is the astral realm, the sphere of the moon, and the mechanism through which the abstract ideas of the higher spheres are translated into physical reality. So it's basically the retrocausal circuitry of the world and the algorithmic scripts that maintain the false reality of any system, really. Um, so yeah, the Dat is the hidden threshold of the abyss. Yep, yep, yep. So that's pretty much it. I think that's all I've got to mention on that. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's it for that scene.
Okay. Well, thank you for watching another episode of iPad Code 2, where we explored like 15 minutes of iPad Code and then an hour and a half of an imagery from a Manly P. Hall book. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. But this will go wherever it